Okay, welcome everyone. This is the video that I promised you all a few days ago, a kind of supplementary video to the initial video we had, our very first video, which covered the use of watercolour washes, how to modify those washes, creating a full value tonal painting using limited colours, either a single monochromatic colour like a neutral tint or a Payne's grey, or in the case today I will be using the brown and blue combination. So we're going to get a good range of kind of neutrals from those two colours. They are complementary. The brown is effectively just a neutralised orange. So to make a brown, we would mix orange with its complementary, which is blue. So in this case I'm starting with an already neutralised orange in the brown, the Van Dyke brown. I would suggest you using burnt umber if you have access to that. Van Dyke brown is a little bit more warmer, a bit redder, whereas burnt umber is a bit more of a neutral brown. But in this case, obviously, I only have access to the Van Dyke brown, and I'm going to be using ultramarine blue, which is a violet blue, a much warmer blue to our cooler blues like Prussian blue, cerulean blue. So I'm using those two to create a range of greys. So I'll just demonstrate how I'm going to be going about that very quickly. So I want to mix up a grey from the blue and the brown. Coming over here and just making this grey. It's going to go slightly more towards the violet grey because our blue is a violet blue and the brown does have a fair amount of red in there, so it's going to be a slightly more violet range of colours that I'm going to get from these. But here we go, you can see that I've just put this down. We've got a nice nice neutral grey there, slightly towards the violet bias. But as I mentioned, by using these two colours rather than just a single colour, I can add more blue if I wish to make this grey cooler at this end, more bluey, and I can add more brown to the grey. Just don't want to add too much too soon to create a slightly, let's just put a bit more brown in there, slightly more warmer greys down this end. So we go from the cool here through to like a neutral, as neutral as I can get from these two colours, down to a warmer colour down here. Okay, so those are the two colours I'm going to be using. I'm going to be employing the use of a hairdryer throughout this process for brevity's sake, just to speed up the process slightly. So do forgive the noise of the hairdryer. I will be looking at how to do voiceovers so that I can do a commentary of the painting process, because it is quite difficult actually talking throughout the process of painting while I'm painting, because obviously I'm trying to focus on the painting and convey the correct message and process and technique to you guys. So it's a lot to think about when I'm having to obviously do a running commentary as I'm painting. So I will look at doing a voiceover for you all. So yes, excuse the hairdryer sound. On occasion, I won't be talking too much during the course of the painting of this piece. I will chip in where I'm going to be employing the use of the edges that we covered in the previous video. So some of those techniques, when I start to use those, I will just comment and tell you why and where I'm using those and employing those particular techniques. So the benefit of using limited palette here with the brown and the blue, or if we're just using a single colour, is we're able to concentrate much more on the tonal structure of the piece, which is arguably probably the most important part of any painting, is how you arrange your tones, and having that full range of tones to create form and volume. So with a limited palette, we don't have to be concerned with colour to any large extent. We'll be using a bit of colour at the end of this painting process with the glazing, but for this stage of the painting we're just really focusing on getting those values correct, and obviously our edges, those three edges we spoke about: soft, firm and hard edges. And that's going to create a sense of form and describe the actual structure of a particular form. Okay, so I've got a couple of examples before I start, because I know some of you are using acrylic. So these were just tonal paintings done in class for demonstration purposes. These were done in acrylic, they're very diluted. And this was burnt umber with ultramarine blue. So the burnt umber is the predominant colour you can see coming through here. The blue is just, I've used the blue in places to just darken the burnt umber, because out of the tube with burnt umber we'll only be able to go to a certain value. By adding the blue, I'm neutralising a bit more, taking it more towards the black, so I can get a good range of values there. And we've got this one here. Okay, so these are just two examples in class of just how to do a tonal underpainting, just using burnt umber, ultramarine in acrylic as a base then for working on top with glazes and more opaque colours. Okay, so let's get started on this piece and have a little look at the reference image, which is here. So I just want you to kind of just take note before we start of kind of the range of edges we're seeing here. We've got a very rounded form in the cheek here, so we've got very soft edges here. This sternomastoid muscle on the neck, again very rounded, so majority of the face here is very rounded forms. There's very few angular forms here. We've got some angular structure in the nose, but these tend to be where we see our firm edges, because there's a slight roundness to it, even though it is very angular, where the front of the nose changes to the side of the nose. Those two planes meet. The transition is kind of like a rounded edge as opposed to a very kind of hard edge. Okay, so to start this piece, and considering obviously the softness of the general softness of the face, I'm just going to wet my paper. So I'm wetting the area that I'm going to be working on, which in this case is going to be the face, and I'm just going to dampen that all over. I'm just going to go over into the hair slightly, because we want the hair to be incorporated into the face. So we don't want any kind of hard edges around where the hair meets the face, because that will just look like the hair's kind of cut out and pasted on. So I just want to make sure that the transition from the hair to the face is nice and soft, and it integrates well into the rest of the piece. I could go ahead and kind of do this over the hair as well, but I will paint the hair separately. I don't have to, because I'm obviously using monochromatic colour here. We're not worrying about separating the colour out of the hair. A nice warm kind of nutty red of his hair with the pinks in the face. We're using the same colour across the whole thing, so it's not a major concern that if I went ahead and just painted the whole hair in here as well, but I will do that separately. It just gives me a bit more time to focus on the face. Okay, so I'm just going to mix up a very light wash. Remember, with watercolour and with acrylic, when we're doing these kind of diluted washy paintings, we're always looking at working from light to dark. So I'm just going to come in here now. I'm just going to start popping some of this colour on, wet in wet. So the eye, I might find that the paper is a little bit too wet from my initial wash, so it might be worth just waiting just a little bit for that to dry out slightly. But I can just go through, modify this. Now we've got very kind of, this is bleeding into here, but I want to keep this light, so I'm going in with a starved brush. I'm just lifting out some of that wash there, just so that bleeds not too, it's not bleeding in too much. Again, I'm just going over here. There's a lot of light and white in the nose here, so I'm going to lift this out again with a starved brush. I don't want to kind of have to lose these very bright lights in the nose here too soon. So at the moment I'm just working down through the face, and the shadow side of the face here. Always make sure you mix up enough colour. You don't want to run out of colour generally, and I haven't mixed up enough at this stage. Yeah, so this is a bit too cool now, so I need to go back in with my brown. The wash is still wet, so I can kind of just go over that. I can lift a bit out if I need to. Make sure I go back in with that slightly warmer colour just there. The lips are very dark, so I can go over those. Come around here. This is just creating some softness to some of those planes of the face. We can bring this all the way down into the neck. We're having a cast shadow down through here, through here. So we're only really leaving the white of the paper where we've got those real bright whites in the piece. So I'm just going to kind of lift out a bit more there, make sure we don't lose that nice stark white there, and I'll lift out a little bit more again on the nose. I'll have to go in and control the washes in the nose a bit more, because I'm going to have to leave those very sharp white highlights in the nose there. Okay, so if you find that your paper's drying out, because you do have to work very rapidly at this stage, drying out where you might end up having some hard edges, go in and just take your damp brush, rinse it off with water, take your damp brush, and then just re-wet that area, pulling that wash into the area. Okay, so that's probably okay for a first pass. So I'm just going to pull out the hairdryer now, and I'll dry that off. Make sure I bring this down here correctly. Alright, so that should be now dry enough to work on. Make sure you always do the touch test. Make sure it's not cold or damp to the touch. So I think we're okay. We can now start to go in. So I'm going to start now working wet on dry, but I want to make sure that I'm going to modify my washes as I work over. So I'm going to try to do this shadow shape in the face now, but modify as I go. So I'm going to have to work quite quickly as I work down to make sure that I don't end up with any hard edges. So I need to soften where necessary as I work down through this. So here, so I can just go in now. I know this is quite dark. Right, so taking that damp brush, going to wet this area here and let this wash bleed into that area, because we've got a slightly softer transition there. This eye is all in shadow. A little bit of highlight on that upper lid. Okay, so I've got that down. This is now where I have to go with that clean brush, damp, pull it out, soften that edge off into the cheek. So this is where I'm able to control really where the wash is going now, whereas I didn't have so much control before when the paper was entirely wet, so that was just bleeding in and going wherever it wanted to go. So here, if I were to leave this here on the nose without going in with a damp brush, just softening that off, I'd end up with a very hard edge if I didn't do this now. And I don't want hard edges here or here. So again, I'm just taking that damp brush and just teasing up to the edge so that I kind of getting that softness. I can just go in here, making sure I'm leaving these two highlights on the nose showing through, bright or white areas. So I'm still continuing down with the wash, just working my way down, gradually darkening where I need to. The whole time I'm working down, I'm modifying my edges because I'm working wet damp up to there, allowing it some room now and an area to bleed into. That's all down, so I can go in straight away. I don't want these hard edges to appear, so I'm going to go in and soften my edges. Always rinse your brush in clean water, dab it off on a paper towel, which I've got folded a couple of times just below my palette, so I can just blot my brush on there and then go in and control that edge. Soften this up here a bit, if I can still get in, lift out a little bit, just soften that off. Okay, just continue down now through the neck. Mix up a good amount of wash again. So the neck here, we've got a very, it's a bit too cool. Get a little bit more brown in there. The neck is very dark, this shadow down through the neck here. So where I've got the jawline here, that's going to bleed nicely into that, so I'll get a nice soft edge there still. But as I work down through here, because I haven't pre-wetted this paper as I'm working down through the neck, I'm going to have to go and modify my edge again, as previously done up through the face. Let's just pop a few value here. Just trying to kind of hit a darker value as I work down, and then we want to modify this edge here. So this is where we're going again, rinsing the brush off, dampening it out, and then just taking that wet brush up to that edge and working through the wash again. As long as the wash is nice and wet, it's just gone down, I'm not going to get any nasty back runs. This will all dry out very nice and soft. Okay, so if I find that the bleed here is a little bit too much, again, just dampening a brush off, just re-going over that with my clean damp brush. That's going to give me a bit of a better transition. Okay, so pop that hairdryer out again, dry that off. A little bit of a dry patch there, so I'll just wet that. Right, so committed a cardinal sin there myself actually. I went in and I kind of re-wet this after I'd started using the hairdryer slightly, so you can see we've got a background form there. That's not too much of an issue because the shadow on the neck is quite dark, so I'll be able to cover that, but don't do that. I noticed a few hard edges last minute after I'd employed the hairdryer, yes, it started to dry out too soon. So here I've got a little bit of a hard edge here that I don't want, so I'm going to go in and just like lifting out as before with a damp brush, I can just obliterate that hard edge. You can lift out to a certain extent, we can remove some of that. Right, so onwards. So we're just doing this in layers of washes as we go down, darkening the shadow up as I move down through the face. And I don't actually have to mix too dark a colour, I can actually almost have the same value of wash that I was using, and because we're laying it over the top of a darker area, it's just going to darken that gradually as I go down. So you never need to darken your washes too much, and it might be a mistake really to do so. Some people might feel that, you know, if there's a shadow on the face, they're going to go in and just mix up a real dark colour for that area. But remember that watercolour is transparent, so it's additive, so when we put one similar strength wash over the top of a dried wash, it is going to darken that area. So again, just working down through here. So this is still wet on dry. So I might not go all the way down through the face at this stage, I might just stick to this area, and because it's a smaller area now that I can go in and modify with my damp brush to make sure I don't have those hard edges appearing. Okay, always softening edges where I need to. Keep that control of working wet on dry, and then just going in and controlling my edges. See a hard edge forming here. Again, go in, soften that edge off, wet the area that you want that wash to bleed into. So we're still preserving, maintaining that control. Now, I would spend a lot more time probably considering what I'm doing here. But again, just for speed, and I don't want to keep you guys here for too long, I'm kind of very much working a little bit faster and with a little less care than I normally would. So I'd encourage you guys, obviously, as you have hopefully you have a bit of time on your hands when you can find it here and there, just to spend a bit more time thinking about your washes, letting them dry naturally where possible. I wouldn't generally use a hairdryer Again, this is just for convenience and speed. Lift out a little bit there on that highlight on the eye. Make sure I get any excess paint off my brush. Just lift out so I have a softer light just in there for the time being. Just a brush blotted here just to lift out a little bit because there is a highlight just around that corner of the mouth. Try keeping everything nice and soft, don't want those hard edges appearing. It's okay to have some hard edges in here, but we don't want too many hard edges appearing at this early stage. We can kind of go in a bit later and determine where we want our hard edges to be. And that's dried out a little bit too much there now, so I might end up with a bit of a back run, so that was a bit of a mistake. But again, it just highlights the need for speed, and very rapid decision making as you're working down through a wash. So you want to give it a good amount of thought before you commence the wash and start working down. Right, I think that's okay for the face wash. Just soften this off a little bit here. Careful with that corner there. Again, don't go and start working into a partially dried out wash. It's always safer to wait, let it dry, and then re-wet and work back in. Glare on my paper with the dampness of the wash here. Okay, hair dryer time again. So you'd repeat this process, go on throughout, apply several washes. You don't want to be applying too many washes. to your piece, because the more washes we get, the more opaque the colour becomes, and we lose that quality of transparency and translucency and depth, which is what watercolour is really great for. So I'm just going to go and put some hair in very quickly. I'm trying to keep this as quickly as possible, so I'm going to speed up the process now. I'm going to miss out a few washes that I might normally do, so I'd encourage you guys just to gradually build up. There's no rush, let it dry out naturally. As it's drying out, it's giving you time to consider your next wash and where you want to place that. But here I'm just dampening that area for the hair, and I'm going to go quite abstract with the hair here, so we don't have to be, again, too literal to our source material. We can have a bit of fun. I generally like to have a bit of fun with the hair and go in nice and abstractly. So I can mix up a nice dark here now for the hair and just try to have the wet in wet kind of take care of a lot of kind of the unknown happy accidents that are going to occur. But the value of the hair is generally, there's no real light whites in there, so I can cover, actually I'll cover the whole area with a wash first. We've got a few whites that peek through, very light values here and there, but if I didn't want to paint around these all of those and just wanted to be a bit more expressive with the hair, I could always go in afterwards with a touch of gouache just to pull out some of those brighter highlights. Let's get some nice edges there, bit of hair breaking out. Try to use the brush to create those nice expressive marks. So I'm going to try to resolve the hair kind of as much as I can at this stage. So we just got our initial wash on there at the moment. Let's get that integrated into the face, so we don't have a nice hard edge there. Not a nice, an unpleasant hard edge in this case. So now I can go in, really kind of get the paint pretty much straight from the tube here now to get some darks. I'm just going to drop some dark colours in here. I can go and give the hair a bit more structure afterwards. It's going to be very soft and diffuse at this stage, but I can go and give it a bit more structure, working wet on dry afterwards and just modifying a few edges as we've been doing as we work through the face. So again, I'm working into a very saturated wet wash at the moment, so we're getting a lot of diffusion happening. So remember the test that I said to do, where you kind of wet your paper, let it dry at different stages and drop washes into each dried swatch of wetted paper at different drying intervals, just so you get a sense of kind of the degree of diffusion that you will get from your washes. So I'm going to go in here now, just pull this into the face. It's not working down through the face again, so that everything is incorporated and becomes part of a whole cohesive structure. I'm just lifting that little highlight around the lip there out. Let's just put a little bit of structure in the ear here. I don't want to focus too much on the ear. I do need to bring this to a close kind of soonish. Obviously, again, I've sped up the process. It would take more time and a bit more care. I'm trying to keep this video shorter, although I think we're running quite long again at the moment. So I will be probably doing commentaries for some of these future longer demonstrations where I do want to kind of go through the whole process with you guys, and I'll do commentaries and speed the videos up so that they're not quite so long. And I might do some full painting videos at actual speed and break those up so you can watch those in installments, because it's always good to see painting progress at its natural pace and rate rather than at 2 times speed or whatever. So just putting a bit of value in the ear there, just so we've got some kind of structure. I mean, this ear would have to probably be, I've gone over with the hair there, so I'd have to come in after the painting's finished and just bring that out with a bit of gouache at the light of the ear. So now I'll hairdryer and I'll do one more wash. See, with this brown and blue combination we are getting a bit of kind of separation from the blue, with the blue and the brown. They're separating slightly from one another, so not ideal, and I don't normally encounter that problem when I use burnt umber and ultramarine, but in this case with the Van Dyke it is separating out a bit. So here now I can go in with wet on dry, and again just placing these down, just trying to create some expressive marks because we can be nice and a bit more abstract with that hair. When you're painting hair, you don't want to put too many strands of hair in. You want to keep the hair as abstract as possible. Just nice kind of gestural marks in there, different directions, following the growth direction of the hair. Leaving a few hard edges when necessary. Mix up some darker colour now, while that hair, the marks I put in the hair is still wet. I can just drop some dark in there. Okay, so we've got to be careful down here again where the hair is meeting the face. It will look a little bit cut out if I don't go up and just soften that edge Now you can see that the hair sits and integrates much better into the face. Let's pull this down a little bit because I really can't see because of the glare of my overhead lamp and the wash. Okay, so just preparing now for the last wash. I'm going to go in before I do this last wash. I'm going to pull out a few of the details with a darker colour where I want these to be hard edged and quite dark and defined. So sometimes we can break that rule of working strictly from light to dark, and we can go in and just find a few of these darker landmarks where we know they're going to invariably be quite dark anyway. So like the nostril here, I can pop in the line of the lips just here, because I know these are going to be hard edged, so I can put these in and not worry about having to modify these edges while they're still wet. I can let these dry out. Not quite sure what's going on here. I'll just dry that off quickly. So I've got a bit of a hard edge in the nose here, which I don't really want, so I'm going to see if I can just lift that a little bit with a damp brush. Right, so the final wash now, I'm going to work down quite quickly, so I'm going to go in with quite a dark here and try to modify this quite dark value as I go down. Not too dark again, because remember we've got that additive process going on. So I think what I might do here is I'm going to just wet this area. Again, don't overbrush because you're going to lift off paint. Just dampen the area a little bit with a damp brush, but don't overbrush it. Darker colour there now, darker value. So I can go in, I know this area is wet, so I can have a bit of fun with that. Brow here. just damp brushing. See how I'm always modifying the edge so I don't have hard edges where I don't want them. It's very important. You place your colour down. It can be quite a dark value because we can go in, I can pretty much take out most of the dark value with a damp brush, just that capillary action to pull up some of the wash. So here again, wet brush, I want a softish edge here for the jaw, so wet brush up to that edge, and I can go back in, completely soften that edge off around the chin here. Go down to the neck now. Wet and wet here, just taking a darker wash in because I do want to wrap this up pretty soonish now. So do remember, take your time, there's no rush with this. It's really what the exercise is about, is exploring how to create that sense of form by modifying our washes and edges when they're down, which is very important. That's going to give us that real sense of the shape and form of any particular plane or surface. So if it's rounded, we want those soft edges. If it's somewhere between rounded and hard, we want those firm edges. And obviously if it's a nice soft angular form, which we're not really going to see on a portrait because it is very soft and organic generally, then we use our hard edges. But here you can see everything is soft, pretty much soft or firm. I'm getting a bit of a nasty bleed there, so dampen that brush off, go back in, make sure this is where you've got to work quick. So already I'm having a bit of a drying out here, so I'm going to have to go back in just with suitably wet brush with wash on. Let's just put a few darks up in the ears here. Again, not too concerned about the ear. Just give it a bit more structure and a bit more form to the ear. Not too much work in it. keep that nice and simple. Right, we're almost finished this wash stage, although obviously I would spend longer, as I mentioned. I keep harping on about that, but for the purposes of the demo, I'm going to finish this up, let that dry out, and then put a glaze on the top, just of a basic flesh colour. So I'm just going to try to go back in here, just get a few more darks in the hair, a few more shapes. So I'm not really able to hit a real black dark with this Van Dyke brown, and the blue is giving me kind of like a dark violet, but I'm not able to get that real black dark that I could from burnt umber and ultramarine. But it's okay for the demo here, the purposes I'm trying to convey. Just need a bit more blue. So I'm going real dark here now. Real dark. As close to black as I can get. I can go in with this real dark now and make sure my colours are mixed up correctly, and really punch out some of the darker accents in the piece. You can see that this adding of your darkest dark near the end stage of the painting really does create pop, more shape and a bit more form. I think we're almost there. I'll just darken the shadow under the jawline now. We'll dry that off and then apply our glaze. Let's come down here. Really go, I can go really dark. Don't be too alarmed if you go too dark like this. The watercolour is always going to dry a lot lighter anyway. So we can go dark because we know that we can go in with a damp brush afterwards and modify this. So I can pull out colour where I don't want it to be. So that's where I'm going in now with my clean damp brush, just going up to those edges, pulling those into this area which is a bit lighter, softening off this edge here because it's a rounded form. Again, we can add some more darks in the hair. I'm going to call that a day for the underpainting here, because I want to just get on to just putting that glaze on top for you guys to see. So I'll just stop the video here, just let this dry out naturally, and I'll come back and I'll add that glaze stage. Okay, welcome back everyone. So I've let the underpainting dry out on monochromatic tonal full value underpainting, and I've just gone in, as I showed you in the previous video last week, with some very diluted washes and glazes of some just more natural flesh colours, which I mixed from cadmium red, Indian yellow to make a kind of a red orange. And it was quite bright in intensity when you mix those two colours together because they're very bright and high in saturation, so I just had to use a bit of complementary to orange, which was the blue, just to dull that down and knock it down a little bit so it wasn't too vibrant and bright. And then I've just applied that over all of the flesh, just leaving the white of the paper for highlights on the nose here, and around the forehead area, the cheek here a little bit, and the lips. Highlights on the lips. So I've applied that all over, and while that was still wet, that glaze, I've just dropped in some redder, warmer colours for the lips, a bit through the cheek, which you can't really see on video here too well, and through the ear again, which you can't see particularly very well. There is a slight redness to those. Okay, so I hope you all enjoyed the rather lengthy video again this time. I will work on shortening those, but it's very difficult to concentrate on painting and try to talk throughout the entire process of painting. Even though I said I wasn't going to talk too much through this, I find myself doing it naturally now. So hopefully you found that useful. You'll be able to kind of work along. If you're going to do this particular portrait, you'll be able to work along with this video. Even if you don't select that reference material, you go for one of the other ones, the landscape or a still life, the process is still exactly the same. You're working up that full value monochromatic painting to resolve all of your tonal structure to your image, and then you're just tinting on top. So I'm not having to worry about neutralizing my oranges and pinks too much, because the grey underneath, because the colour I'm putting on top, the orange red, is is very transparent. It's a glaze. That grey is going to show through, and that grey is going to modify that red and just knock it down a little bit in intensity anyway. Okay, so yeah, good luck. As it's YouTube, the timeline of the hour-long video, you can scrub back and forth, so whatever stage you're at, you can just keep kind of like dragging that timeline back over that step until you've completed that step, and then you can move on to the next step, and so forth until you've got to the conclusion of the picture. You've resolved your tonal painting, and you can just apply those few glazes on top. So good luck with that, folks. I hope to have a drawing demonstration video for you all, if not this Tuesday, as videos will now be released on Tuesdays because it gives me Monday to record them and edit them where necessary. So if not this Tuesday, it will be the following Tuesday, and you'll get a written project as per usual this Tuesday if I can't make the video in time for you all. Okay, but I do hope you enjoyed it. Good luck with it, and yes, I shall look forward to speaking to you all very shortly. Okay, bye bye.